The Calrothian war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory like a swarm of metal locusts. 2,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons that had reduced entire planets to ash. Their dark hulls reflected no light, making them look like holes in space itself. Commander Vexnar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. This would be conquest number 48. The humans would fall just like all the others. Earth's defense station Sentinel Prime detected the fleet immediately. Alarms screamed through the corridors as officers rushed to their posts. Admiral Patricia Hayes walked calmly to the command center, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had waited 20 years for this moment. Every drill, every simulation, every sleepless night had been preparation for what was about to happen. The Calrothian transmission came through on all channels. Vexnar's face filled the screens, his four eyes glowing with confidence. His translator rendered his words into flat, emotionless English. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender completely. They would become servants of the Calrothian Empire. Their colonies would be absorbed. Their resources would be taken. Resistance would mean extinction. Patricia listened without expression. When Vexnar finished his speech, she responded in a voice that sounded almost apologetic. Humanity needed 72 hours to discuss the terms among their government. Could the Calrothians wait? It was a reasonable request, surely. Just 3 days to coordinate a response across 12 colony worlds. Vexnar laughed. The sound was like metal scraping on stone. Of course they could wait. Let the humans talk. Let them argue. Let them pretend they had choices. The result would be the same. He cut the transmission and ordered his fleet to hold position. His intelligence officers had already briefed him thoroughly on human capabilities. 300 ships at most, scattered across their small territory. No significant weapons technology, a young race that had barely left their home system 2 centuries ago. What Vexnar didn't know was that his intelligence was exactly what humanity had wanted him to believe. The moment the transmission ended, Patricia entered a code into her console. It was a sequence she had memorized but never used. The code that would change everything. Across human space, encrypted signals began racing through quantum channels that didn't appear on any galactic registry. These weren't normal military communications. They were going to places that officially didn't exist. Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat in his fighter cockpit at Outpost Blackvale, floating in a region of space that every star chart marked as empty void. The outpost was a massive station, home to 50,000 personnel, completely invisible to sensors. Stealth technology that humanity had developed over decades kept it hidden. Jake had been stationed here for 8 years. He had never seen Earth. His parents thought he was working on a mining colony near Jupiter. That was the cover story all shadow military personnel used. When the signal came through, Jake felt his heart rate spike. Red lights flashed across his cockpit displays. Around him, the entire fighter wing scrambled to their ships. Pilots who had trained together for years, who had run the same combat scenarios 1,000 times, finally getting ready for the real thing. The waiting was over. The Calrothians had arrived. Jake checked his weapon systems. Everything was green. His fighter was equipped with technology that would seem impossible to other galactic species. Weapons that could punch through shields thought to be impenetrable. Engines that could outrun anything in known space. Sensors that could see through most stealth systems. Humanity had been building, researching, and developing in secret for 200 years while pretending to be weak. On Earth, President Helen Grant stood before the Emergency Security Council. The room was deep underground, protected by layers of concrete and shielding. Around the table sat military commanders, intelligence directors, and government leaders. Every person in this room knew the truth about humanity's real capabilities. They had kept the secret their entire careers. Helen looked at each face. They were scared but determined. She understood. This decision would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. For 2 centuries, humans had played a careful game. They had built colonies that everyone could see while building twice as many in secret. They had maintained a small, visible defense fleet while constructing an armada in hidden shipyards. They had acted like a minor power while becoming something far greater. The strategy had been simple. Study the galaxy first, learn how empires rise and fall, understand the mistakes other species made. Earth's historians had pored over thousands of years of galactic history. They saw a clear pattern. Species that revealed military strength too early faced one of two fates. Either they were destroyed by fearful neighbors who united against them, or they became corrupted by their own power and turned into the very tyrants they had feared. Humanity chose a third path. Build strength in silence. Wait for the moment when that strength would be needed. Make sure that when they revealed themselves, it would be for the right reasons. The vote was unanimous. Every council member agreed. The Calrothians had crossed into human space with intent to conquer. They had threatened Earth itself. They had given humanity the perfect reason to drop the mask. After 200 years of careful pretense, the galaxy would finally see what humans had really become. Helen authorized the release of Protocol Shadowbreak. Across human space from Earth to the furthest hidden outpost, the military received the same message. Stand ready. The reveal would happen when the Calrothians advanced. Let them think they were winning. Let them push deep into human territory. Then show them the truth. Patricia Hayes received confirmation that all Shadow Fleet elements were in position. 30,000 ships hidden in the darkness between stars waiting for the signal. She thought about her son, who commanded a stealth carrier in the outer dark. She thought about the millions of humans who had lived double lives, who had trained in secret, who had sacrificed normal existence to build this moment. The Calrothians thought they were facing 300 ships. They had no idea they were walking into a trap built over 2 centuries. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. In 72 hours, the galaxy's understanding of humanity would change forever. The species that everyone thought was weak and peaceful would reveal teeth sharp enough to make even the Calrothian Empire bleed. She opened a channel to all visible human fleet elements. Her orders were simple. When the Calrothians advanced, fall back. Make it look like a fighting retreat. Draw them deeper. Let them think they're winning. And when they're fully committed, when they're surrounded by what they think is empty space, send the signal. The Shadow Fleet would answer. The 72 hours passed like a held breath. Commander Vexnar watched the chronometer count down with growing impatience. He had given the humans time to accept the inevitable. Now that time was over. He issued the order, and the Calrothian fleet surged forward like a tidal wave of metal and fury. The human defense fleet was exactly where his scouts had reported. 400 ships arranged in a defensive formation near the colony of New Montana. Vexnar studied the tactical display and felt satisfaction warm his chest. The humans were going to fight. Good. It would make the victory more meaningful. His weapons officers reported ready status. His shield generators hummed at full power. The Calrothian Empire had never lost a battle. Today would not be the first. The fleets met in the space between New Montana and the Kepler mining belt. Human ships opened fire first, their weapons flashing in the darkness. The Calrothian shields absorbed the impacts easily. Vexnar had fought species with far more advanced weapons. These humans were throwing everything they had at his fleet, and it barely scratched the paint. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the battle unfold exactly as planned. Her ships were firing at full intensity, making it look like a desperate defense. In reality, they were barely using a fraction of their actual capabilities. The weapon systems on these visible fleet ships were decades old by human standards, good enough to make the fight look real, but nothing compared to what was coming. She gave the order to fall back. Her fleet began a fighting retreat, moving deeper into human territory. The Calrothians pursued eagerly, their formation tight and confident. They were predators chasing wounded prey. Vexnar pushed his fleet forward, wanting to end this quickly. His forces moved past New Montana, past the defensive stations, deeper into the space that humans claimed. Captain Lisa Chang sat in the command chair of the carrier Shadow of Neptune, watching her tactical display in the darkness. Her ship was massive, twice the size of the largest Calrothian battleship, but completely invisible. Stealth technology wrapped around the hull like a cloak, bending sensor waves around it. Beside her carrier, 49 other stealth carriers waited in the void. Each one carried 200 fighters, 10,000 attack craft ready to launch. Lisa had commanded the Shadow of Neptune for 12 years. She had been recruited into the Shadow Fleet program when she was 18 years old. Her family thought she worked as an engineer on Mars. They had no idea she commanded one of humanity's most powerful weapons platforms. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. Now it was finally here. The signal came through on the quantum channel. One word now, Lisa gave the order. Around her, systems that had been dormant for years roared to life. The stealth field flickered and died. The shadow of Neptune appeared on every sensor in the battle space like a ghost materializing. And it wasn't alone. 49 other carriers emerged from the darkness. Beyond them, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, all dropping their stealth fields at once. Vexnar's confident expression froze. His tactical officer started shouting, his voice high with panic. The sensors were showing impossible readings. Ships appearing everywhere. Not just a few. Thousands. The display was lighting up with contact after contact. Each one representing a human vessel that had been hiding in what they thought was empty space. Patricia watched the Calrothian formation falter. She could almost feel their confusion through the vacuum of space. They had been so certain of victory. Now they were surrounded by a fleet that outnumbered them 15-1. She opened a channel that broadcast to every ship in the system. Her voice was calm and clear. No anger, no triumph, just stating facts. The Calrothians had wanted to see humanity's military strength. Now they were seeing it. This was the real human fleet. The Shadow Armada that had been built over 2 centuries while the galaxy thought humans were weak. The Calrothian fleet tried to reform their lines, but human ships were everywhere. Fighters poured out of the carriers like angry hornets. Jake Morrison launched from his bay, his fighter accelerating to speeds that should have crushed him against his seat. But human inertial dampening technology was generations ahead of galactic standard. He pulled maneuvers that would kill pilots from other species. His wing swept through the Calrothian formation, targeting their command ships. The weapons on his fighter were small, but they hit with precision that scrambled Calrothian shields. Other fighters followed, thousands of them, coordinating their attacks through quantum communication networks that couldn't be jammed. The Calrothians tried to shoot them down, but human fighters were too fast, too maneuverable. Lisa launched her full complement of fighters and began moving the Shadow of Neptune into firing position. The carrier's main weapons were designed to crack planets. She targeted a Calrothian battleship and fired. The beam of focused energy crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. The battleship's shields held for almost 3 seconds before collapsing. The ship broke apart in a silent explosion that lit up the darkness. Vexnar tried to call for reinforcements, but human jamming systems had already isolated his fleet from the rest of Calrothian space. Every communication channel was flooded with interference. They couldn't call for help. They couldn't coordinate with their empire. They were cut off, surrounded, and facing an enemy that had completely blindsided them. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Calrothians fought with desperation, but they were outmatched in every way. Human weapons cut through their shields. Human fighters dodged their defensive fire. Human tactics surrounded and isolated their ships. Vexnar watched his proud fleet being systematically dismantled. A third of his ships were already destroyed. Another third were disabled. The rest were taking heavy damage. He had never experienced defeat. The Calrothian Empire had conquered 47 star systems without ever losing a major battle. Now he understood why. They had never faced an opponent who was actually stronger. They had been bullying weaker species, mistaking easy victories for invincibility. Humanity had just taught them the difference. Patricia Hayes had been counting the Calrothian losses. She didn't want to destroy them completely. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to send a message. She opened a channel to Vexnar's flagship. Her offer was simple. Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, reparations to every species the Calrothians had enslaved, dismantling of 3/4 of their military fleet, and most importantly, an immediate retreat from human space. The alternative was total annihilation. Patricia made sure Vexnar understood that humanity had ships in reserve. Lots of ships. The fleet he was fighting wasn't even their full strength. If he refused the terms, humanity would reduce his entire fleet to debris and then take the fight to Calrothian home space. Vexnar looked at his tactical display. He saw the truth in her words. The human ships that were fighting showed no signs of strain. Their formations were perfect. Their weapons still firing at full strength. This wasn't humanity's desperate last stand. This was them holding back. He had no choice. He surrendered. The surrender of Commander Vexnar sent shockwaves through the Calrothian Empire, faster than light itself. The flagship's distress signal, weak and broken, managed to reach the nearest relay station before human jamming cut it off completely. The message was simple but devastating. The human fleet was massive. The invasion had failed. Vexnar was surrendering. The Calrothian High Command refused to believe it at first. 2,000 warships defeated by humans? Impossible. They sent probes to investigate. Every single probe was intercepted by human patrols before it could get close to the battle site. The humans returned them intact with a simple message attached. "Stay away, the war is over. Accept the terms or face consequences." Colonel Danny Wright led his fighter squadron through patrol routes around the captured Calrothian fleet. His ship moved with grace that seemed to defy physics. The gravitational compensators in human fighters were 3 generations ahead of anything the galaxy had seen. Danny could pull turns that would liquefy pilots from other species. His weapon systems could track multiple targets simultaneously. His shields could regenerate faster than most species could damage them. He had been part of the Shadow Fleet for 15 years. He was 33 years old and he had spent almost half his life preparing for this moment. His parents thought he was an accountant on one of Jupiter's moons. His friends from childhood thought he had a boring office job. The truth was far different. He was one of the most skilled fighter pilots humanity had ever produced, trained in facilities that didn't appear on any map. Danny watched the Calrothian ships limp along under human escort. They were heading out of human space, moving slowly because a quarter of them needed to be towed. Their weapons were disabled. Their shields were down. Human destroyers surrounded them on all sides, making sure no one tried anything stupid. The mighty Calrothian armada reduced to prisoners being escorted out like criminals. Admiral Patricia Hayes reviewed the casualty reports in her private office. 83 human ships damaged, 12 destroyed, 417 personnel killed, 2,100 wounded. The numbers hurt. Every loss was someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. But Patricia had to balance that pain against what would have happened if humanity hadn't been prepared. If they had actually been as weak as they pretended, the Calrothians would have enslaved Earth. Billions of humans would have suffered. She composed personal messages to the families of the fallen. It was the hardest part of command. Some families knew their loved ones were in the Shadow Fleet. Others had believed the cover stories. Those families would learn the truth now. Their son or daughter hadn't died in a mining accident or a transport malfunction. They had died defending humanity against an invasion. Patricia made sure every message honored their sacrifice. Vexnar sat in his command chair, but it felt like a prison. Human guards stood at the entrance to his bridge, polite but armed. They didn't threaten him. They didn't need to. Everyone knew who had won. His communications officer reported that the relay beacon to Calrothian High Command was working again. The humans had stopped jamming it. They wanted the Empire to know what had happened. The message Vexnar sent back was the hardest thing he had ever written. The Calrothian Empire needed to accept human terms. All conquered species must be freed. All tribute must be returned. 3/4 of the military fleet must be dismantled. The empire that had dominated this region of space for 50 years was finished. Not because they had been destroyed, but because they had finally met someone stronger. He included detailed scans of human capabilities in his report. Ship counts, weapon specifications, tactical analysis. Everything he had learned from the battle. The High Command needed to understand what they were facing. Humanity wasn't just strong. They were organized. They were advanced. They had been pretending to be weak while building an empire in secret. The scariest part, Vexnar wrote, was that humanity still had ships in reserve. The fleet that destroyed the Calrothian invasion wasn't even their full strength. Intelligence estimates suggested humanity might have 50,000 ships or more, scattered throughout their hidden territories. They could have conquered half the galaxy if they wanted to. Instead, they had stayed hidden. That level of patience and discipline was terrifying. Back on Earth, President Helen Grant addressed the Planetary Congress. The vote to reveal the Shadow Fleet had been unanimous, but now came the harder questions. What happened next? Humanity had shown its teeth. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. Some species would fear them. Others would want to ally with them. Some would probably try to destroy them before they became too powerful. Helen had prepared for this moment for years. Earth's diplomatic corps had strategies ready for every possible response. But the core message would remain the same. Humanity built the Shadow Fleet to protect themselves and others from aggression. They weren't conquerors. They were defenders. They would use their strength wisely, The Threen delegation arrived at Earth 3 days after the battle. They were a species that had been enslaved by the Calrothians for 3 generations. Their ambassador was an elderly female named Senna, who had been born in captivity. She wept when she met Helen. The humans had done what no one else in the galaxy had been willing to do. They had stood up to the Calrothians. They had won. They had forced the Empire to free its slaves. Senna asked Helen how humanity had hidden such strength for so long. Helen explained the strategy carefully.
Humanity had studied galactic history before revealing themselves.
They saw what happened to strong species. They were either destroyed by fearful coalitions or corrupted by their own power. Humanity chose to stay hidden until their strength was needed for the right reasons. Jake Morrison returned to Outpost Blackvale after 2 weeks of continuous patrol duty. The station was buzzing with activity. Everyone knew they wouldn't be secret anymore. The galaxy knew about the hidden outpost now. Blackvale would probably get an official name and coordinates. Jake felt strange about that. He had lived in the shadows his entire adult life. Being visible felt wrong somehow, but there was also relief. No more lying to his parents. No more pretending to be someone boring. He could tell his friends the truth about what he did. He was a fighter pilot in humanity's most advanced military force. He had fought in the battle that changed galactic history. That was something to be proud of. Lisa Chang received orders to bring the Shadow of Neptune to Earth orbit. The carrier would be part of a show of force. The Galactic Council was demanding explanations. They wanted to see human capabilities with their own eyes. Helen had agreed. Let them see. Let them understand exactly what humanity had become while everyone was looking elsewhere. As Lisa guided her massive ship toward Earth, she thought about what came next. The secret was out. The Shadow Fleet was now the visible fleet. Humanity would take its place as a major galactic power, whether they wanted to or not. The question was how they would use that power. Lisa had faith in human leadership. They had been smart enough to hide their strength for 2 centuries. Surely they were smart enough to use it wisely now. The Calrothian fleet finally crossed out of human space 2 weeks after the battle. Vexnar's last transmission to Admiral Hayes was simple. Humanity had taught the Calrothians a lesson they would never forget. Strength without wisdom leads to defeat. The Empire would honor the terms. They would free their slaves. They would reduce their fleet. They would never threaten human space again. Patricia watched the defeated fleet disappear from her sensors. The battle was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Galactic Council chamber on Axis Prime had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive hall, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear, anger, and confusion. The humans had revealed themselves as the greatest military power in known space. Species that had thought themselves safe now questioned everything. If humanity had hidden such strength, what else didn't they know about their neighbors? Ambassador Kyle Rogers walked through the corridor toward the council chamber with steady steps. He had been humanity's chief diplomat for 20 years. Every negotiation, every treaty, every smile and handshake had been part of the act. He had sat in meetings where other ambassadors discussed humanity as if they were children, inexperienced, naive, harmless. Kyle had nodded along, playing the role perfectly while knowing the truth. Now the mask was off. Kyle entered the chamber and every eye turned to him. Some species looked at him with fear, others with anger. The Vortan ambassador had her crest raised in what her species used to signal aggression. The Helix delegate wouldn't meet his eyes at all. Only the Threen ambassador Senna gave him a small nod of gratitude. President Helen Grant and Admiral Patricia Hayes followed Kyle into the chamber. This was the first time a human president had personally addressed the Galactic Council. Helen had refused to attend before, citing Earth's internal politics as more important than galactic affairs. Another part of the act, making humanity seem isolated and uninterested in broader galactic power. The council chairman, a being named Toph from the Meridian species, called for order. His voice amplified through the chamber's speakers. The chaos settled into uneasy silence. Toph looked at Helen with his 3 eyes, each one showing different emotions: fear, curiosity, suspicion. He asked the question everyone wanted answered. Why had humanity hidden their true strength? What were they planning? How could the galaxy trust a species that had lied so completely about who they were? Kyle stepped forward to answer. His voice was calm but firm. He activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of human territory, the official version that every species knew. 12 colonies, a modest chunk of space. Then the map expanded. New colonies appeared, dozens of them. The territory grew 5 times larger. Hidden shipyards materialized. Secret research stations. Military outposts that had existed for decades. The chamber erupted again. Species demanded explanations. Some called it an act of war. The human deception was treated like an attack on galactic trust. Kyle waited for the noise to die down before continuing. He explained humanity's reasoning with simple logic. Humans had studied galactic history before making first contact. They had accessed every database, read every historical record. They saw a clear pattern. Species that revealed military power too early faced terrible fates. Either they were destroyed by coalitions of fearful neighbors, or they became corrupted by their own strength and turned into conquerors. The Calrothian Empire was a perfect example. 50 years ago, they had been a peaceful trading species. Then they developed advanced weapons technology. The power corrupted them. They started demanding tribute, then taking territory, then enslaving entire species. Power without wisdom had turned them into monsters. Humanity chose differently. They would build strength first. They would study the galaxy. They would learn from the mistakes of others. And they would only reveal themselves when the moment was right, when their strength could be used for the correct reasons. The Vortown ambassador challenged Kyle's words. She asked what gave humanity the right to decide these things. Who were humans to judge other species? Their deception showed arrogance, not wisdom. Commander Nicole Carter stepped forward. She was the director of the Shadow Fleet program. Though few in the galaxy knew her name until now, Nicole was 52 years old and had spent her entire adult life building humanity's hidden military. She knew every ship, every station, every secret that humanity had kept. Nicole explained the infrastructure in detail. Every human who showed exceptional ability was offered a choice when they turned 18. Join public society or enter the shadow programs. 1 in 50 humans served in the military that the galaxy never saw. Millions of soldiers, pilots, engineers, all living double lives, all keeping the secret. The training took years. Shadow Fleet personnel learned not just combat skills but philosophy and history. They studied why empires fell. They learned about the corruption of power. They understood that strength without purpose was dangerous. Every person in the Shadow Fleet knew they might live their entire lives without ever fighting. The goal wasn't conquest. The goal was readiness. Nicole showed data on human technology development. Weapon systems that were generations ahead of galactic standard. Shields that could withstand punishment that would destroy other ships. Engines that could outrun anything in known space. Stealth technology that made ships invisible. All of it developed in secret over 2 centuries. A small ambassador from the Quillan species asked a terrifying question. If humanity was this advanced, why hadn't they conquered everyone already? What was stopping them from taking whatever they wanted? Helen answered that one personally. She explained that humanity remembered its own history. Earth had gone through periods of empire and conquest. Nations that took what they wanted. The results were always the same. Short-term power leading to long-term suffering. Wars that devastated entire continents. Weapons that nearly destroyed the planet. Humanity had learned those lessons the hard way. The goal of the Shadow Fleet was never conquest. It was security. Humanity wanted to make sure that when they encountered aggressive species, and statistics said they eventually would, they would be strong enough to protect themselves and others. The Calrothian invasion proved the strategy was correct. The Threen ambassador Senna stood to speak. Her voice shook with emotion. Her species had been enslaved for 3 generations. They had begged the Galactic Council for help. The Council had debated. They had formed committees. They had written strongly worded letters. But no one had actually done anything. The Calrothians were too strong and no single species wanted to challenge them. Then humanity revealed itself. In one battle, they accomplished what the entire Galactic Council couldn't do in 50 years. They defeated the Calrothian fleet. They forced the Empire to surrender. They freed the Threen and every other enslaved species. Senna asked the Council a simple question. Where was the harm in what humanity had done? The chamber fell silent. Species looked at each other uncomfortably. The Threen ambassador was right. Humanity's deception had hurt no one. Their reveal had saved billions. If they wanted conquest, they could have started 2 centuries ago when no one suspected their strength. Instead, they waited. They prepared. They used their power only when needed. The Helix delegate finally spoke. He represented a species known for logic and long-term thinking. He pointed out that humanity had shown remarkable discipline. Most species that gained power used it immediately. Humanity had the patience to wait centuries. That suggested wisdom beyond their young age. Toph called for a vote. The council would decide whether to accept humanity's explanation or treat their deception as a threat to galactic security. The voting took 3 hours. Species debated among themselves. Some wanted to demand that humanity reduce their fleet. Others argued that would make everyone less safe. The Calrothians had proven that aggressors existed. Having someone strong enough to stop them was good for everyone. The final vote was close but clear. The council accepted humanity's right to maintain their fleet. They granted Earth a seat on the Security Command, the first new member in 200 years. But there were conditions. Humanity would accept a role as galactic peacekeepers. Their strength would be used to protect others, not to expand human territory. Helen accepted the terms without hesitation. This was exactly what humanity had wanted, the chance to use their strength for good, the opportunity to make the galaxy safer for everyone. Kyle Rogers left the chamber knowing that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer the quiet minor species in the corner. They were a major power. That brought responsibilities, challenges, dangers, but also opportunities to make things better. As the human delegation returned to their ship, Patricia Hayes received reports from Fleet Command. 7 conflicts were brewing in different parts of the galaxy. Aggressive species threatening weaker neighbors, pirates raiding trade routes, border disputes turning violent. The galaxy needed peacekeepers. Humanity was ready to answer that call. 3 months after the Battle of New Montana, the first test of humanity's new role arrived. The Draxian Republic had invaded the smaller Confederation, a group of 12 peaceful species that shared a region of space. The Draxians wanted their resources, their planets, their trade routes. The smaller Confederation had no military to speak of. They had always relied on diplomacy and trade agreements for security. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. The invasion violated every treaty that governed galactic civilization. But as always, the Council was slow to act. Committees were formed. Debates were scheduled. Strongly worded statements were prepared. Meanwhile, 3 planets had already fallen to Draxian forces. Admiral Patricia Hayes didn't wait for the Council to finish debating. She had authority from President Helen Grant to act when necessary. The Guardian Armada, as the Shadow Fleet was now officially called, deployed to smaller space. 200 human ships appeared at the edge of the conflict zone. Patricia sent a simple message to the Draxian commander: withdraw immediately or face consequences. The Draxians ignored the warning. They had studied the battle records from the Calrothian defeat, but they believed they could do better. Their fleet was smaller than the Calrothians, but more advanced. They had confidence in their tactical abilities. They attacked the human ships with full force. The battle lasted 90 minutes. Human destroyers tore through Draxian formations with precision that seemed choreographed. Fighter wings led by pilots like Jake Morrison made the Draxian defense look stationary. The humans disabled most of the Draxian fleet without destroying them. They wanted to teach a lesson, not commit genocide. The Draxian commander surrendered when he realized his entire fleet was surrounded and outmatched. Patricia offered the same terms she had given the Calrothians: withdraw from conquered territory, pay reparations, reduce military forces. The Draxian government accepted within 6 hours. The smaller confederation celebrated their liberation. They sent delegations to Earth thanking humanity for their intervention. The galaxy watched and learned humanity wasn't making empty promises. They would actually use their strength to protect weaker species. Not everyone was happy about this. Some species saw humanity's interventions as dangerous. They argued that no single species should have the power to decide galactic conflicts. They worried that humanity would eventually abuse their position. Kyle Rogers addressed these concerns in diplomatic meetings across the galaxy. He explained humanity's philosophy carefully. The Guardian Armada would only intervene in clear cases of aggression. They wouldn't take sides in legitimate disputes. They wouldn't impose human values on other species. They would simply prevent the strong from preying on the weak. Over the next 2 years, the Guardian Armada intervened in 7 conflicts. Each time they sided with defenders against aggressors. They stopped an attempted genocide. They broke up a pirate network that had terrorized trade routes for decades. They mediated border disputes between species that had been fighting for generations. Not every intervention was military. Sometimes the presence of human ships was enough to prevent conflict. Species that might have gone to war thought twice when they knew humanity was watching. The Guardian Armada became a deterrent just by existing. General Nicole Carter, promoted after the reorganization, oversaw the transformation of the Shadow Fleet into a public force. Thousands of personnel who had lived in secrecy could finally tell their families the truth. Bases that had been hidden were now marked on galactic charts. The infrastructure that humanity had built became visible for everyone to see. Nicole stood on the observation deck of Guardian Station Alpha, watching the fleet conduct exercises. Hundreds of ships moving in perfect coordination, fighters launching from carriers, battleships practicing targeting solutions. All of it happening openly now. The secret was gone, but the mission remained the same. She thought about the sacrifices that had made this moment possible. Millions of humans who had lived double lives. Soldiers who died in training accidents that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Families who said goodbye to children who disappeared into programs that officially didn't exist. All of them had believed in the plan. They trusted that their sacrifices would matter. Now Nicole could see the results. The galaxy was safer because of what they built. Species that would have been conquered were free. Conflicts that would have turned into wars were resolved peacefully. Humanity's strength was being used exactly as intended. Lieutenant Jake Morrison received a promotion to captain in command of his own squadron. He was 29 years old and had spent 11 years in the Shadow Fleet. Now he led training exercises for new pilots who didn't have to hide what they were. The next generation of Guardian pilots would grow up openly. They would know from childhood that humanity protected others. Jake thought that was important. The Shadow Fleet had worked because everyone believed in the mission. They accepted the secrecy because they understood why it was necessary. Now that the secret was revealed, humanity needed to make sure future generations kept that same dedication. Power without purpose was dangerous. Every Guardian pilot needed to understand they were protecting others, not dominating them. Captain Lisa Chang commanded the Shadow of Neptune, now officially designated as the flagship of the Second Guardian Fleet. Her massive carrier patrolled the outer regions of galactic space, showing the flag in areas where conflicts might brew. The sight of her ship, bristling with weapons and carrying hundreds of fighters, made aggressive species think twice. Lisa received requests from other species wanting to tour her ship. Delegations curious about human technology. She allowed some visits, carefully controlled. Let them see enough to understand human capabilities, but not so much that they could copy the technology. Humanity still maintained advantages that kept them powerful. During one tour, a young ambassador from the Quillan species asked Lisa if she was afraid. Humanity had revealed themselves as the strongest power in the galaxy. That made them a target. Other species might unite against them out of fear. Historical patterns suggested this happened often. Lisa answered honestly. Yes, there was danger. Humanity had taken a risk by revealing themselves. But hiding forever wasn't possible. Eventually, someone would have discovered the truth. The Calrothian invasion had forced humanity's hand, but it had also given them the perfect opportunity to reveal themselves as defenders rather than conquerors. The key was maintaining that image. Every action the Guardian Armada took needed to reinforce that humanity used strength wisely. They protected others. They prevented aggression. They didn't conquer or exploit. As long as humanity stayed true to those principles, they would be safe. President Helen Grant served 2 more terms before retiring. Her successor continued the policies she established. The Guardian Armada remained focused on peacekeeping. Human territory expanded slowly through colonization, not conquest. Trade agreements replaced military threats. Earth became known as a place where disputes could be mediated fairly. The Calrothian Empire, reduced to a fraction of its former size, eventually became an ally. The species that had once tried to conquer humanity now asked for their protection. Pirates from outside galactic space had been raiding Calrothian colonies. The Empire's reduced fleet couldn't stop them. They requested Guardian assistance. Patricia Hayes, now retired but consulting for the military, recommended accepting the request. It would show the galaxy that humanity held no grudges. They were willing to protect even former enemies. The Guardian Armada deployed to Calrothian space and eliminated the pirate threat in 3 weeks. The galaxy that emerged from humanity's revelation was different from what came before. Aggression still existed, but it was met with overwhelming force. Weaker species could develop without fear of conquest. Trade flourished because roots were protected. Disputes were mediated before they turned violent. Not everyone loved humanity. Some species resented their power. Others envied their technology. A few still plotted ways to reduce human influence. But the galaxy as a whole was safer, more peaceful, and more prosperous. 50 years after the Battle of New Montana, historians studied humanity's impact on galactic civilization. The consensus was clear. Humanity had changed fundamental assumptions about how power worked. They proved that strength could be used for protection rather than conquest. They showed that military might, guided by wisdom and restraint, could create peace instead of destroying it. The Shadow Fleet had emerged from darkness and become the guardian force that the galaxy needed. Humanity had trembled the galaxy with fear when they revealed themselves, but in time that fear transformed into something else. Respect, gratitude, hope that someone was watching over the innocent. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps that was humanity's greatest achievement. They had used their hidden strength not to dominate, but to lift others up. They had become protectors in a galaxy that desperately needed protection. The secret empire had become a force for good, and the stars were brighter for it.